So, hello from me as well. I'm very happy that I'm here with you today, and those of you who will be watching this panel later online. As Stella said, my name is Pinelopi Theodorakakou, and I'm the co-founder of Women on Top. And I'm really happy not only because we're physically here in the same room together, but because I think we are also together in a sense of we all want to try and unlock the key issues of what a gender-responsive and sustainable economy looks like and how we could achieve it. So a disclaimer that this panel has been hit hard by pandemics and time differences, but we will get through it. So together with me to discuss and take the thread from the previous panel and take it a bit, to the next level and see how all this could be achieved is Manto Patsaoura. Thank you for being here with us, Director of Kariera.gr, and I'm really happy to have someone physically with me. And Zanni, President and co-founder of Women Act. May, hi, thank you for being here with us. So,
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm so sorry I can't be there.
don't worry, it's nice to see you and have you there even virtually. So my first question is about the corporate world. And I have the expert here with me today, Matee. You know the corporate world inside out. So we were talking a lot about leadership, and we will talk more about leadership and governance with May later on. But I would like to have your view and your experience on what's happening with sustainability as a key focus in corporations. So it's one of the buzzwords lately. And have they shifted their focus in terms of jobs? So, are there new green jobs in the market? And have they also, the corporations, have they shifted their focus on inside, so their teams? Have they created, have they moved people from one department to another?
Hi to all. First of all, thank you for the invitation. It's truly a privilege to be here. I must admit that yesterday's discussions around climate have left me deeply concerned about where we are going, what we have done so far, and what still remains to be done to establish a sustainable future for ourselves and our children. And it's really inspiring to hear all these discussions today and all the passion that comes from people who want to actually do something about it. Now, sustainability used to be a unique career path. It used to be connected with specific sectors such as renewable energy or organic agriculture. It was tied with specific job titles such as sustainability manager or ESG reporting lead. And it was considered to be the subject matter or responsibility of environmental policymakers or scientists or researchers and large organizations. Now, as more sectors started adopting sustainability goals, the green economy itself started expanding to include more sectors. And the more sustainability goals were attained, the more roles were introduced or redesigned to make sure there are people who are actually pursuing these goals. Essentially what was once considered a green career has gone, and a green role has gone beyond environmental scientists and sustainability managers to include other professionals from other sectors that were not or have not been up to date considered green, like fashion or transportation or even finance. And increasingly, there are also C-level executive roles that have been introduced to make sure that there are people responsible for setting the corporate sustainability strategy. And there is this whole transition towards green jobs, but at the same time, there is also a transition towards green skills. They are on the rise, and employers are in the lookout for them in the market increasingly. And let's not forget, employers nowadays address an environmentally conscious workforce. So people want to work for companies that are socially and environmentally responsible. To tell you the truth, in some years from now, I don't know whether we will be discussing about sustainability roles anymore, because I feel that everyone will have to do it. And maybe this is the only way we can aspire to have a truly sustainable economy.
Thank you so much, and I will keep the green skills that you mentioned, and I really want us to go deeper into that a bit later. But first, a question about politics and leadership to May. May, we know that in order to achieve, to increase the proportion of women and girls in leadership and decision-making sectors, we need to do something about it. But first, before we take a deep dive, I want you to share from your experience, how does participation in politics intersect with female participation and climate action?
Thank you, Pinelopi. Women's leadership is key to climate action, actually. I mean, women obviously tend to show greater concern for environmental issues, but apart from that, it is much needed because the negative impacts of climate change affect women a lot more, and girls, of course. I will say an example. When there's a natural climate, actually not natural, disaster, it's very likely that the girls are the ones who will not go to school afterwards, finishing their education, or maybe subject to gender-based violence. So we see that we actually need more leadership in that domain. The participation of women generates more effective climate outcomes. We've seen in research again and again how they assess risk differently and how they prioritize typically the welfare of families and communities a lot more. However, the problem is that women are underrepresented in environmental decision making at all levels. This has various causes. First of all, the gender differentiated tasks that women have, the unpaid household labor, the unequal power relations in communities. An example would be that common prerequisite for women is land tenure. And while the women, according to the UN, 64% of them globally do not have equal land rights. So you see the problem. They cannot be involved in something when they're not deemed to be equally involved in that. Now, according to a UN report, the problem is also one of visibility. Women's voices are heard a lot less. For example, in plenary meetings to do with environment, 74% of the time was men speaking. And finally, a last thing I'd like to say is that women continuously face glass ceilings that prevent them from reaching the top positions when it comes to environmental leadership. Now, the way to overcome this would be, these are systemic barriers, so it's by having gender-responsive policy measures like land tenure reforms, like gender quotas for environmental agencies, like investment in social services.
Thank you, May. And I think the previous panel also stressed, and Professor Di Madame, I think it was you that mentioned that we're not only, the female voice is not only not heard in the plenary meetings or within a parliament, for example, but also when there's a wildfire, men won't trust women to know the path, the way out of the wildfire, which is something that personally shocked me, and I think a lot of other people here. May, can I ask you a follow-up question to what you just said? So let's say that, as you said, there are women in plenaries, there are women in parliament. We in the Women on Top organization, but also in reports and surveys that we have studied, we know that it's not enough to, as we jokingly but not jokingly say, it's not enough to get invited to the party, but you also have to get asked to dance. So how do you think female political participation, representation in national parliaments actually influences the climate change policy outcomes? And my practical question is, how do women vote on such issues? Do we know? Can you share with us an example?
Sure. There's a lot of research that demonstrates that women do tend to favor green legislation. There was actually one of research that had to do with 91 countries and national parliaments, where it showed that there is a strong positive relationship between the percentage of seats occupied by women in the parliament and the climate change policy that's taken by this. Now, why are we discussing this? Because let's not forget that the agenda is the following. The gender gap in politics remains the largest across sectors. That is 26.1% of national parliament seats go to women. So it makes a big difference what we're talking about. If we are witnessing a lack of political commitment to address climate change, that to do with various factors, but one of them is definitely the lack of female representation. So a solution would be to have affirmative action and increase women in politics. So then we would be able to also result in more country commitments to address climate change. Now, there's a big question now. Is this unique in certain settings or is it across? There's an example in Sweden, for example. They noticed that in a study, there was consistency that women, female elected officials reported greater opposition power than their counterparts. This begs the next question: what happens when you have more, for example? And there's more research there that shows that women have and men have equal concern for the environment, but their legislative behavior suggests that women make a difference by voting and for more environmental protection when it comes down to it. So let's not forget that it does make a difference how many women you have in parliament. Again and again, it is shown consistently that women tend to go for green legislation.
Thank you. That was very helpful. And as Stella mentioned in the beginning, the data-driven conversation is also really important. So thank you, May. Mateo, back to you. So May mentioned how we can influence legislation and policy from being into policy making positions, but also, environmental, being present as females into environmental governance bodies. What's happening in the corporate world? So we know that the students in the ICT sector, the female students in the ICT sector, their percentage is lower than men. And we know that at some point in the pipeline, even if they enter the ICT sector, and I'm mentioning the ICT sector because in my head, before this conversation started, it was the sector that fed the green jobs. So my question is double. Who is applying for these green jobs? And is there a gender balance? Is there not? And I will stop there and then I'll ask you more about the green skills you mentioned before.
So I will start with something, and I think you will all agree with me. Gender equality in the world of work is of utmost importance if we want to advance towards the greening of our economies. Green jobs and roles and skills alone cannot make sure that we are heading towards the sustainable future we want if there are still gender imbalances around the world and any progress in addressing them is still slow. Women make up over half of the world's population, which is impressive. And there's a lot of untapped talent there that could further economic growth. Still, historic inequalities have kept women away from land ownership, from high-paying jobs, from access to education, participation in decision-making in politics. And the pandemic has only made matters worse because it has exposed and exacerbated deeply rooted gender inequalities that are still there. A study by PwC actually showed that women feel more than men that they've been hard hit by the pandemic, that their career prospects have worsened. And it has also highlighted the lack of awareness on the part of women about the green jobs that the growing green economy is generating, which is also important. As a result, women are still falling behind in what we say are the green roles of the future. And although green jobs are increasing, which is equally important, and the female share of talent is increasing as well, they still lag behind their male counterparts. Another report showed that in the last 6 years, 66% of the transitions made towards green jobs, they were made by men. So I think it's imperative that we rethink the green economy from a gender perspective. Any failure to do so will just make sure that these inequalities remain, they perpetuate, and they just set a clear and continuous obstacle to our moving towards a more sustainable future.
So you mentioned that at some point women are missing opportunities to know about these green jobs. What can corporations do? What can organizations do? Companies to attract more female talent into the green jobs, as we call them now, and what can they do to support them in developing the green skills, not only but also while they are in the corporation, but before?
Mm-hmm. I'm very happy to see that there are organizations and leaders in those organizations who care about gender equality, about gender diversity. And they care about making their workplaces more inclusive. But they're not the majority, and there's still a lot that need to be done. Although female participation in the C-suite is increasing, still, as my fellow speaker said, women are underrepresented at all levels of an organization. And there are companies who are taking the lead and have taken initiatives to make sure that they provide an inclusive environment for all. The vast majority, I would say, even fail to acknowledge that there is an issue. So the first step, I guess, towards fighting against this gender gap is acknowledging that there is one, and then deciding to take a stand, deciding to do something about it. And the third important step for me is looking at ourselves, because we all have unconscious biases as individuals and as organizations that we need to battle before we even introduce a formal corporate policy or initiatives. And then there are multiple things that organizations can do to just move towards a more inclusive environment or a more diverse workforce. They could try to open up their pipeline of talent to make sure it's more diverse. They could more promote their female talent. They could be more transparent about compensation between men and women and the initiatives they take in this field. And they could also try to make their job descriptions more inclusive. There are a lot of things that need to be done, but I think the most important one is to acknowledge there is an issue. We shouldn't take it for granted, because it's not. And then commit to gender diversity, commit to gender equality. And there are a lot of examples from the marketplace on a global basis that one can learn from and actually find ways to apply in their own organization. But another point I would like to add is, and I thought about it after I spent a week at Harvard doing a course named Women Leadership Forum. So before I went there, I was wondering, why should there be a Women Leadership Forum? Why? Is there a Men Leadership Forum? But I thought maybe a week at Harvard will help me understand. So yes. So after a week there, what I realized is that women ourselves also need to be empowered. We also need to believe that we can do it, because there are not enough role models out there for us. And in some cases, the studies prove the information is not sufficient. So we need also to be boosted and empowered to actually pursue the future we want for ourselves and our families and children.
Thank you. I will keep the word commitment, I think, because it's very important. May, we will stress your voice a bit more, and I publicly apologize for that. But I really want to ask you, because Mado mentioned commitment, and I would like to ask you, what can governments do? And not only policymakers, but people that are in public leadership right now, not only in Greece, but generally, what can they do to either be encouraged to incorporate gender-sensitive policies about climate action, but also bring along more women, look for female talent in leadership and policymaking and politics, to make the difference, to have us in the parliament and make the difference you mentioned before?
Yes, well, first of all, as Mado mentioned, it has to do with visibility and acknowledging that there is an issue. That is number one. So say a government comes and says, this is happening, for some reason, we do not have enough women where we should have, and this shouldn't be the case. So first of all, we have this problem, then we look at the roots. What are the systemic, the visible and invisible barriers that are holding women back from getting their voices heard and getting themselves into top leadership positions? And once you analyze the roots of this, you should look into how action can bring about change. Could this be by extensive education programs? Could this be by allowing women to have more help where they should have, not only to advance in their career, but we should not forget, especially now with COVID, that women have ended up taking care of two generations, one up and one down. And that severely limits how far they can go, because the ambition is there. There's no ambition gap in my mind. Women do want these positions, say in environmental leadership positions or elsewhere. They just don't get to have the same opportunities to go for them. So the actions taken by governments are essential. I mean, civil society is great. You and I are both part of it, Pinelopi, but it has to start from government. And that is the only way. Civil society can be a bridge. It can bring the best of people and it can make them volunteer, and it can help when it comes to extensive campaigning for issues, because let's not forget that society should be ahead of these issues. This is the only way to pressure government. If you keep on pointing, there aren't enough women here, there. If a politician knows that if he's surrounded by men, he gets bad publicity, trust me, he gets surrounded by women. Amazingly enough, he finds leaders, he finds women, he finds CVs, all these excuses we hear all the time. Oh, I wish I had more women, but you see, I can't. And where are they? Well, they're not missing. They're all around. I mean, look at Delphi. Look at where you are now. You're surrounded by leaders right now. Sure, gender shouldn't matter, but for some reason it does matter, and we should acknowledge this and pick women and push them ahead.
That's great. Thank you. We also believe that we shouldn't be gender blind, although we wish at some point we can be, but now we can't afford this luxury, not in politics, not in leadership positions of any kind, not in the corporate world. So thank you for stressing this out for everyone, May. I would like to ask you both a common question. And you mentioned a lot of initiatives, but it's my objective every time for people that are watching this panel, either here today with us or they will be watching it later, to have some practical steps, insights that they can take away and maybe start talking about or actually implementing in their work. Starting maybe not tomorrow because you're all going to be here most probably, but from starting Monday. So what's the one thing or two things, Mado, that you would urge key stakeholders that are watching this conversation to do practically to start stressing the importance of the intersection between gender equality and climate action?
I would say take a stand, what I said before,
I like that.
Because I feel it's very important. And I would also say become aware of how gender inequalities and climate change are interconnected. We should become aware of the fact that the climate crisis is not gender neutral, and we should try to understand why that is. We should, for example, know that women and girls, and I think it was mentioned before, face the most detrimental effects of climate change around the world. And it is one of those areas where we more need to think about citizens of the world beyond our own countries. We need to know, for example, that agriculture is the main employment sector in low-income areas of the world, and that women, at times of droughts, they make an extra effort to cater for their families and secure their income. We need to know that climate change generates conflicts around the world, and women and girls are more likely to face the vulnerability and the extreme levels of violence. And at times of disasters, women and girls are less likely to survive, which is extremely important if we think about the future of our families, of our communities, and our planet. So I will stick with take a stand. And I will share an example from our own company, because I think everybody can take specific actions that are custom to their industry, company, organization. But I truly believe that everyone can do something about it. So, as you know, Kariera.gr is in the recruitment sector. So traditionally, we've been receiving requests on the part of companies to find people with whom to cover their open positions. And there have been a lot of times, unlikely in the past, where we have been asked to find men to cover specific roles. And we are lucky to have a CEO who's here with us today, Theofilos Vasiliadis, who decided to take a stand. And he said, no, we cannot do that anymore, because we need to be participating in the solution and not the problem. So we started saying no openly to employers, and we've gone back to them continuously, saying that we will come back to you with the best fitting, most qualified candidates, irrespective of their gender. So I think everyone, this is a simple step that we took, for example, and another one at the same time we took, because we, as I said, need to fight our own unconscious biases, is to make sure that our recruitment teams are not influenced by those biases as well. So we have and are still looking to enrich our training and development programs internally with courses that actually help us in battling our own unconscious biases. And we want to extend that to the whole organization. So it's looking inside to see what you can do about yourself and your organization, but also looking outside about how things are done in your industry, in your scope of work, and making sure you take even the smallest action, step by step, to make sure that you correct something that is not right. Because only through collective action can we aspire to see a different future for us.
Thank you, Matee. I think it's very important. You said two very important things. One is having men allies in top positions that understand what gender equality means for everyone, and also taking a look internally, but in practical manner. So looking into the unconscious biases, not only with a survey, for example, but taking steps internally for education to address any issues or challenges in the hiring and promotion also processes. So thank you for that. May, a comment on my question.
Again, of course, about visibility. This is something we talk about constantly at Women Act, and we try to do this by public campaigning, for example. I'll give an example. We saw that there were so many manels, we decided to do something about it. So we had this campaign saying no more manels, let's put more women out there as speakers in events and conferences. I would say that not only public campaigning, but the upskilling of women is also very important. That's why we should do more and more educative programs. And finally, I would like to say that to push women forward, we should look to what senior leaders are doing. I'm talking about mentoring. I'm talking about looking around, and this is how you want to be remembered, to be the one in a room and the next generation. So I think it's very important that we talk about we push women that have made it to the top to their door for the next generation.
Thank you, May. Thank you, Matee. We have quite some time to take questions and comments also from the people that are here with us today. I know we have a very distinguished guest here amongst us, Mrs. Kariera.gr. Welcome. And do you have a comment to make on everything that was discussed?
Hello, everyone. Hi, can you hear me? I'm honored to be here. Hello, May. Pleasure to hear you, Manto. And we just presented yesterday, actually, at a late session, together with the National Security Advisor of the Greek Prime Minister and Eleni Mirivili, who's the Chief Hit Officer at the City of Athens, a report at the Atlantic Council that an issue brief on the links between national security and climate change. And having worked on this report, I see a twofold opportunity or challenge, if you will. But I like to say this as an opportunity. One is, by all means, you need to connect civil society and regional governments and cities with central government, the big politics, and make the link so that they interact, because in climate change, it's more important than in any other, arguably, sector, because some of the solutions are regional, right? Some of the solutions are city-based. Some of the solutions is actually the civil society that will bring about. So we need that, for sure. And I'm glad to report that yesterday, actually, between them, the National Security Advisor of the Greek Prime Minister and Eleni Mirivili from the City of Athens, they were discussing after a panel the need to work together. So we do need to do more of that. And at the same time, on a regional level, right? Climate change is a systemic risk for our region in particular, the Mediterranean, for our country. But we cannot pretend that we solve the problem domestically, even if we were perfect, and then nothing will touch us. No, that's not the way it works. Not in the Mediterranean, not in the planet. So we need to have a global mindset. We need to look beyond our region. We need to engage our partners in the European Union, across the Atlantic, in the US, to show the specific problems of the Mediterranean, to showcase the risks for our economic models in the region, for our national security, and work with them to develop a strategy, not just for the European Union countries, right? But for the region, for the Mediterranean region, for the South, for the East, further beyond Central Africa, a great arc of instability there that the National Intelligence Council in the US is highlighting in their first inaugural report on the national security challenges for the world from climate change. So these are things that we need to engage at the same time. And I want to go back to gender here. We need to engage with them twofold on the regional scale and on the global scale by also bringing in the gender equation, right? The gender aspect of it. And just by taking a stance, as you said, Mateo, and engaging government, as you're doing, May, this is the way to just be there, be on the table, for more women to be there. And yes, because we're the most vulnerable of the world are the ones that are being affected the most, and these still, unfortunately, tend to be women, right, across the globe.
Thank you so much for this intervention. And if I may ask a follow-up question to you, and take it down to the individual level. So the previous panel mentioned, and I think it was you, Professor Di Madama, that you mentioned that people are overwhelmed, or Aubrey, I think it was Aubrey, that people are overwhelmed from what climate change means. And I'm thinking, and if anyone wants to answer the question as well, you're welcome. How can information play a role into people taking a stand, into individuals getting involved, either within the civil society groups and networks, but also within their community? And what's the role of misinformation? What's the role that misinformation plays? And yes.
No, both important questions. And I don't pretend to have the answers. I just need to tell you, yes, as a professional in the media, I totally acknowledge the role of information into engagement, right, and public engagement with these topics. So if you have a report and you can highlight the key aspects and raise awareness about where the Mediterranean stands, for example, the danger for all of us. That's step number one, so that we can all acknowledge what the situation we're faced with. And then people will have different solutions to it, right? Some might choose to just close the borders and think this might be enough. You know, some might say, no way you can stop it. I mean, the Mediterranean has always been a place where populations were, they were moving, they were exchanging of trades, services, goods. So, but the first step is actually putting all the information that we already have out there, because the reports are written and they're very well researched. So we're very sure about what the situation about climate change will be in the Mediterranean. We should be having no doubts about that. What the national security challenges are, how we address them. These are questions that we can discuss in an open debate. So I think that this is what needs to happen. You know, for the longest time I was covering the European Union when I started my career, and you know, there were actually programs supported by the European Union to get European Union news out there. So they were actually sponsoring trips to Brussels for Greek journalists, right, to go and engage. And so I think for climate change, maybe we should be thinking about something similar, right, like engaging a new generation of journalists, of public speakers, influencers on the climate, and supporting them in engaging with the topic, learning more about it, and providing the solution, because it's the new generation that is going to have to deal with it and provide the answers to these questions as well. They will have to live for it, for sure, with it, for sure.
Thank you. Thank you for taking this question. Zefi, a brief comment because we have Nzambi here with us, and I think I have
Thank you.
some time
Just
to
to
ask you a couple
mention
of
that
questions.
what our colleague here talk about, it's not important just to solve what is the climate crisis, but which is the answer. This is something really important, what we can do. Not just, all this catastrophe, the disasters and the problems, but the positive. Which is the way to resolve this issue and how we can be, every one of us, part of this solution. I think this is really important. Nothing.
And I will take this how it was very lucky that we took it down to the individual level because we have here with us today, and I think I have time to ask you 2 questions. Nzambi Matee from Kenya. Hi, welcome to our discussion. We're very happy to have you with us.
Thank you very much.
And so Nzambi is a startup founder of a team, a company that recycles plastic to make it into pavement blocks that the team claims are stronger than cement. So Nzambi, if you could tell us more about your work and how you got your inspiration.
Okay. And apologies for the delay. The internet is not collaborating today. So yes, my name is Nzambi Matee. I'm founder of Gjenge Makers Limited. Gjenge is located here in Nairobi, Kenya, and we recycle plastic into alternative building products. So in addition, we're using plastic waste to building problem because in Kenya we have an affordable housing deficit of about 2 million units. And this number increases with 200,000 units every single year. With every increase in population, this number increases. And after analysis, so a cost implication analysis of the construction project, we realized about 60 plus minus percent of the cost implication goes to the building blocks. And because of that, the building blocks, but the building materials. And so with that said and done, we thought, okay, how do we make this cost, the bulk of it, reduce so that we can be able to target and to have a huge impact in the affordable housing space? So the logic is then using plastic waste and converting double building products. So in answer to do up to this point, we have recycled about 100 metric tons, and we have provided job opportunities within the value stream, about 130 youth and women. Thank you.
So there were some internet connection issues, so we could hear part of what you said, but we will make sure that everyone gets the link to your work once the panels are online. You are a female startup founder, which is not a very common theme anywhere in the world. And I would like to ask you what I asked all the panelists earlier. So how important is it to get female talent involved, not only in building sustainable businesses, but also not only building businesses in the sustainability sector, but also getting female talent involved in sustainable businesses? How important is that? And what would be your motto, let's say, to influence more young girls and women to get involved?
Okay. For me, I think, and with this new normal of this new age, call it sound very grandiose with my if anything else has taught us during COVID situations, if we all come and pull us towards tackling a solution, we might well just not do it all together. So the end of the days where you have one of things that women can be engaged here.
And it's very difficult for us to follow what you say. And we don't want to take up any more of anyone's time, but we are very much hoping to have you with us in one of our next conversations. So if we don't have any other questions from the audience to either May or Mado, we can, yes.
I was shy, to raise my hand, but my name is Maria Fernandez Pinoza. My name is Maria Fernandez Pinoza. I'm a member of the Global Women Leaders for Change and Inclusion. It's a network of 60 women from around the world working for a feminist multilateralism. I'm a former president of the UN General Assembly and former foreign minister of Ecuador. I just wanted to say that I really like, this space to discuss issues of gender equality and how they intersect with climate change. And just to say that climate justice is going to be impossible to achieve if we do not have a feminist and gender equality lens. That's like a basic issue, but perhaps more importantly, I really appreciate what you're doing in terms of bringing knowledge, policy, and action and response at the local level. We work more on the global space. I've been a climate negotiator for more than 10 years representing my country, and I have to say that we need, in climate negotiations at the global level, we need more voices from women. Just let me give you an example. I was part of the panel yesterday on the climate crisis. There were 6 members of the panel. I was the only female there. So that shows that we need more spaces to have our voices heard, to bring together the connection between the knowledge, the local practice, and the global decision making. That's basically what I hear from all of you. And the other very important aspect is to bring together the peace and security agenda, the gender equality agenda, and the conflict and the climate agenda. Basically, I think it's critical because women are peacemakers, are queens in resilience building, and all that we have heard today. So just kudos to all of you, and you count on us. Well, I said 60, unfortunately, we lost one of our members, the great Madeleine Albright, very recently. So we are 59. She's always, will always be part of our network, but just to say that, just congratulations, and I'm very happy that we have spaces like that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for not being shy and taking a stand. And I could not close this panel more, nicely than you did. So thank you everyone for watching and participating. Thank you to my panelists. Thank you for a wonderful and insightful conversation.